Story 1. Seasonal Halloween Store, 2002. I remember the doors opening, jack-o'-lanterns and animatronics waving me into a world of spooky wonder. It was only October 4th, and I was already so excited for trick-or-treating I could barely breathe. I looked at the sign above, the generic Halloween store logo haphazardly plastered over the once bright and wonderful sign to Heidi's Palace, a back-in-the-day hybrid clone of both Chuck E. Cheese and Toys R Us, one that apparently didn't exist anymore. I could recall the commercial for the grand opening, a comically tall mascot in a suit with an eyeball for a head cutting a big ribbon with a large set of golden scissors. I remember the cartoons airing on TV, but was too young to know it had gone bankrupt and closed, leaving Shell in a corner of the otherwise busy mall. The thought of it being painted so easily made me feel strange, but the dancing ghosts and zombies inside were quickly changing my tune. "Come on, buddy, let's go see some scary stuff." My dad patted me on the back, and together we went in. As soon as I was through the doors, a blur of movement flashed before me, and a clown screamed with outstretched arms. I nearly jumped out of my skin, and my dad laughed. I recoiled at his menacing face, one that quickly melted away, and said, "If you need help finding anything, let me know," before chuckling and dancing away. I felt tears welling, but my dad said it was just a joke and assured me he was just trying to spread some Halloween spirit. In seconds, I had forgotten about the old Heidi cartoon, my world consumed by bags of candy corn and hanging costumes. The Halloween store was a magical place, with loads of decorations and disgusting props, even a lady dressed as a witch behind the counter. My dad corralled me around the skeletons and prop heads, letting me get close, but not letting me touch anything. "These things are expensive. If we break it, we have to buy it." It was something he always said, a voice that echoed in my head every time I reached for the light-up pumpkins or giant spiders. It didn't matter if I couldn't touch them. Just being in the big spooky world made my heart race so fast I thought I would pee myself. Hundreds of costume choices, anywhere from a zombie pirate to a giant hot dog. The bigger kids were crowded around the wall of masks, so my dad decided to avoid it and distracted me with costumes from popular scary movies. I kept expecting the clown to pop out again, but I never saw him. We made several laps around the store, and each time I saw something I had missed previously. With each round, my dad got more and more tired, and I could hear the patience thinning in his voice. I still hadn't found a costume. I could tell we were about to go, and I was doing everything I could to keep us in the scary wonderland. Just as he was steering me towards the register, I thought of something that made my world crashing down. We had never looked at the masks. I looked back at the wall of faces and saw the bigger kids had cleared out. I thought of the clown lingering and decided to chance it for an opportunity to see them. My dad was talking sweetly to the witch cashier, and she was leaning towards him, twirling a long lock on her finger. I tugged on his hand to get his attention, one he pacified by squeezing my hand in warning. Well, I never thought I could really pull off a lumberjack, but, "Dad, can I please go look at the masks? Please," I blurted, making both of them look at me. I could see my dad's flash of anger, one that seemed to fizzle away when the witch put her hand on his. He sighed and reluctantly agreed. "Only for a minute, and don't touch anything." But I was already gone, ready to have the whole wall of masks to myself. I dashed through rows of costumes, blinking lights, and weaved through other customers as I made my way to the wall. I could see them clearer now, all of my Halloween spirit writhing in a torrent of anxious excitement. I burst out of an aisle and into the open wall, feeling dwarfed under the size of the collection. I looked for the clown and saw no sight of him. Without my dad trailing behind me, I suddenly felt very alone, the wall of masks staring down at me. I looked over each face, some I recognized, others I didn't. A man with nails protruding from his face. The wild-eyed face of a man wearing someone else's face. A black unicorn with burning stars for eyes. I looked at each one, marveling at both the detail in the masks and the feeling of dread it inspired in me. Despite my growing fear, I kept looking, each one more unsettling than the last. An unsettling white face with brown hair, a man with horribly burned skin. Something between the hangers caught my eye, and I found myself stopping. There was something hiding in the shadow, the faintest glint catching the lights from overhead, like a mask had fallen down behind the others. It was roundish and looked like it had a dot in the middle. I tried to see it better, but it was just too dark. I had to get closer. I looked for my dad and realized I was too far away from the register to see him. The store suddenly felt very empty, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I decided I would just take a peek and run back to him. I turned around and parted the other mask with my hands, tried to get a better look. It was round like a beach ball, a singular dot right in the center. I moved my face closer, the familiar shape slowly making sense in my head. After a moment, I realized it wasn't a dot, but a pupil. It reminded me of Heidi's playhouse, but the realistic features made it look more unsettling than friendly. And there wasn't another like it in the whole store. It was perfect, and I wanted it to be my costume. I reached for the mask, but it was too far away. I tried to worm my way between the hangers, keeping the mask in my view as I inched between them. When I reached again, one of the hangers caught my shirt, preventing me from going further. When I tried to shake it off, I felt something grab my hand. I looked to see long black fingers wrapped around my hand, an icy grip that came from the shadows of the rack. I felt a sickening pit in my stomach and tried to pull away, but it wouldn't let go. The pupil on the Heidi mask dilated and blinked. Before I could scream, the hand yanked me into the wall, and I blacked out. When I awoke, I felt the cold press of the floor on my face. I jumped to my feet and looked around, feeling a kindling panic when I didn't recognize where I was. I was in an aisle, black and white checkered tile reaching for as long as I could see. There were shelves on either side of me, neatly organized toys stacked high until they almost touched the fluorescents above. "Dad!" I called out, my voice meeting nothing but dead silence. The aisle seemed to stretch forever, hundreds of toys lining the path both ways. I found myself shivering, wanting desperately to go home. Next to me was a cardboard cutout, bold letters announcing the grand opening. Heidi's Palace. Join Heidi and his sidekick Shep the Sheepdog on the greatest game of hide-and-go-seek ever. The cutout depicted an unusually tall and lanky man dressed in a suit, with a large eyeball serving as his head. Beside him was an adorable-looking sheepdog with sparkling eyes that stood on its hind legs like a person. It looked just like the cartoon I had seen on TV. At the bottom of the sign read its catchy slogan, "No one can hide from Heidi." A scream echoed down the aisle, and I looked to see the clown from the store. He was running towards me, flailing his hands. I'm not sure what frightened me more, the sight of him or the fact that he looked terrified. "Kid, oh my God, kid, we gotta get out of here," he shouted, grabbing me by the shoulders. He was breathing hard, tears streaking through his clown makeup. I started to cry. "Kid, tell me, how did you get here? We need to find a way out. He's coming," he shouted, frantically looking back down the direction he came. There was nothing but darkness, a billowing, shifting void that seemed to churn at the end of the aisle. "Who's coming?" I blubbered, lips trembling. "I don't know who he is. He's just not fucking right. We gotta go, kid. We gotta." Suddenly, a large hand gripped the clown's shoulder and yanked him away, pulling so hard his oversized shoes kicked off his feet. The arm that grabbed him stretched from the darkness and held him up in the air, wrapping around his throat until he choked for breath. "No, please, Dash." I watched in horror as the arm slammed him down, an impact so hard it rattled the boxes on the shelves. The clown coughed and clutched at his stomach, and the long arm slithered away and into the darkness. "Run, kid, run." He coughed, but he wasn't looking at me. From the darkness poked a large pair of golden shears, reflecting in the fluorescent light. The blades opened like a guillotine, worked by two long hands that gripped the loop fiercely. Out stepped an incredibly thin body, standing tall with a massive bloodshot spherical eyeball. I froze with fear as the scarily shaped Heidi crouched to keep his head from hitting the ceiling. He cast a shadow over the clown as he approached, who was holding his hand out in surrender. "You thought you could hide from me." It spoke with no mouth, the massive eye narrowing in front of him. "No." The blades closed, shearing the clown's arm and head from his body. The separated pieces flailed and sprayed, but Heidi was already opening the shears again to give it another go. He closed them again, and then again, flinging a spatter of minced guts and bloody spray as he kept snapping the giant scissors. As red speckles peppered his giant eye, Heidi looked at me and stopped, snapping the shears at the air. I turned and ran, heading into the opposite direction as a piercing shriek emitted from the eyeball. The limbs skittered like a spider, closing the distance in seconds as I screamed. I woke in my father's arms, crying hysterically. We were sitting on the floor, and he was rocking me back and forth as a crowd gathered around us. I was back in the Halloween store. The checkered tile beneath me was once again old, scuffed carpet. Heidi was nowhere to be found. My dad asked me what happened, saying he found me on the floor, crying by the masks. I told him everything. Heidi with his scissors and the clown in the long store-like hallway. The girl which cashier suggested maybe I'd gotten lost in the back and found some of the old store cutouts. She said, Harv, the clown, was supposed to be grabbing more items to restock, and she would go get him to apologize. She returned moments later confused, saying he was nowhere to be found. Underneath the wall of masks, a red stain was growing in the carpet. Story 2. The kids dressed up as me for Halloween. We'd relaxed the dress code the week before Halloween. Principal thought it might get kids excited for school. They'll be more excited to show off their costumes and stressed about their work, she assured us. And you know what? She was right. Monday, we just finished saying the pledge when I noticed the snickering coming from around the room. My eyes searched the sea of vampires and Disney characters until I found the subject of their amusement. Lily, the same little Lily who's come to think of herself as something of a class clown in recent months, wearing a dark and curly wig that looked an awful lot like my hair, and a suit jacket remarkably similar to those I often wear to teach, grinning with the smug satisfaction of someone who knows they've impressed their peers. She was me for Halloween. I knew there wouldn't be any ignoring this if I wanted to get any work done at all. The kids wanted their joke, so I let them have their joke. Class, out of everyone in here, who do you think chose the scariest costume? Every single student pointed to Lily. The room erupted in laughter. Joke of the century, apparently. Lily looked me in the eyes with that same smugness in her smile, and this time, with a bit of malice as well. She knew I had to play her game. She knew she'd won this round. I don't like Lily. Tuesday. It couldn't just be a one-off joke. Of course not. A comedian like Little Lillian, she doesn't like being called that, wouldn't stop there. Oh no, this had to be a group project. This time, 2 more students followed her lead. Benjamin and Isabella walked in with hastily thrown together approximations of my wardrobe. I shouldn't have given them the satisfaction. I should have gone on with class like I didn't even notice. But I did notice, and I just had to play along. Oh no, it's spreading. Laughs and laughs. Lily wins again. But it's never enough, is it? I saw them copying me. All 3 of them. The hand motions I made during the lesson, I saw them out of the corner of my eye. Of course, once I looked directly at any of them, their little hands would be right back on their desks like nothing happened. They knew I saw them. I think I even heard them whispering parts of the lesson a few times. They're trying to get in my head. Wednesday. They got me this time. They really got me. Half the class dressed like me. Fine. I can take it. But then there's David. David came to class in my exact outfit. The outfit I wore that day. I mean, in a kid's size, but still it was the same clothes. How'd he know? It's not like my wardrobe is on an exact schedule. A lucky guess. Too lucky. Maybe they followed me, saw what I was wearing when I left my house. But how would they copy it in time for class? That's when I realized it. Their little plan. They're not just trying to mock me. That's not nearly cruel enough. They want to scare me. Lillian. This kid is going to be the death of me. Thursday. Laura. She was one of the good students. I never had any trouble out of her. That's the problem with a kid like Lily. She can't just act out on her own. She corrupts. I recognized it immediately. I didn't even know it was something I would recognize, but the kids, they knew. They knew. There was Laura, in my classroom, wearing the same outfit I'd worn to my first day of school more than 20 years ago. I looked around the room. It was nearly the whole class now. Their costumes were getting more convincing, but no other was as eerie as Laura. The good student. They were copying me again. So many of them this time. It would be hard not to notice. I got fed up at one point, turned around as fast as I could, one arm raised, and saw Lily in the exact same stance. I honestly don't know which one of us moved first. Friday. They're copying my face. I don't know how they do it. It's every student now. They all look just like me. They've won. She's won. I can admit that. They dress like me, and it's scary. I'm scared. That should be the end, shouldn't it? I didn't teach anything that day. At some point, I don't know how long it had been, Lily stood up and walked to my desk. I almost didn't recognize her. I hoped she wanted to apologize, to tell me they'd all taken it too far. I thought she might at least say it's over. Now that she won, I got you a present. She held out a mask. I took it. It was a corruption of my face. Bloated, discolored, eyes entirely white, bulging out of their sockets. It looked real in a way. I don't look like this. That's the only response I could manage. You will. Monday again. The weekend was a break, but it didn't help much. I didn't see any of the kids. I thought I had a few times, but it was just me. My reflection, I know how it sounds. But these costumes, they're convincing. No more teaching. Not until it's over. One kid yelled out, "Why aren't you wearing your mask?" I don't can. Story 3. Never carve pumpkins before Halloween. I'm the kind of person who starts counting down to Halloween on November 1st. Always have been. I could never get enough of the holiday when I was younger, and that stayed with me as I've gotten older. So you better believe every October, I make it a point to have that house on the block. The one that you can barely see the lawn from how many Halloween decorations there are. Once the leaves start turning, that's my cue to put out the decorations. And considering how people are always stopping by to take pictures or drive past my house, I wouldn't have it any other way. Although the one thing I can't put out until shortly before Halloween itself are the jack-o'-lanterns. Of course, that moment is always a bit bittersweet for me, because on one hand, carving the pumpkins means Halloween is almost here. But on the other hand, before we know it, Halloween will be over. But I recently got an idea. Why don't I carve some pumpkins early? It could be a fun little quirky tradition. Christmas in July is a thing, so why not jack-o'-lanterns when summer is in full swing? I saw no reason to not try it, so I went off to get some pumpkins. Finding them in the summer isn't as easy as other times in the year, but in the modern era, finding stuff out of season has never been easier. So once I was able to find some pumpkins, it was just a question of how many I wanted. I decided on 5. Then I paid for the pumpkins, bought some candles to go with them, and brought the stuff home. All that was left was to decide when to carve them and then get down to work. I decided to do it that weekend because we were due for a nasty storm. Sure enough, the weekend came, and the storm arrived right on schedule, and it was intense. This was no quick summer downpour that lasts 10 minutes, and then it's over. It rained all day, and it didn't take long for there to be flooding in the area. The sky was an overcast gray, and I didn't feel like going anywhere, so that was my cue to start carving pumpkins. By now I've done it a million times, so I'm well practiced at it. which means it wasn't long before I had hollowed out the first one and was working on etching a face into the pumpkin surface. This part was definitely way harder than hollowing out a pumpkin, but I've practiced this enough as well to the point where I'm not horrible at carving a face, but I'm still nowhere near the amazing artist that some people are at this. That's the one Halloween thing I haven't mastered yet. So my first one turned into a generic spooky face with a twisted grin. It's simple, but a classic. So then I got started on the second one. This one I turned into a happy face with a genuine smile. The other three I tried different things with, but they just ended up being variations of the first two. But that didn't bother me a bit. I always enjoy the process, and they all truly become something special once you light the candles, which is exactly what I did after that. Then I placed them inside the pumpkins, turned off the light in my kitchen, and stood back to admire the effect. It made me smile, as it always does. So now all that was left was for me to take them outside one by one and arrange them. My house is a small two-story building, but it comes with a comfortable front porch. That's where I put some of the pumpkins once I've turned them into jack-o'-lanterns, along with on the 3 stone steps leading up to my porch. So I arranged them and stood back to admire my handiwork as the rain thudded on the roof and filled the streets. It was a nice effect, because the pumpkins and the candles within them stood out starkly amongst the gray, wet atmosphere. And, thanks to my porch roof, which extended all the way to the 1st stone step, it kept me dry and gave me a great view of the entire street. With that done, I went inside to enjoy the rest of my evening. I had some ravioli with tomato sauce and salad for dinner, and treated myself to some red velvet cake for dessert. Then I watched a movie on TV. Just before I went to bed, I stepped back outside to blow out the candles inside the pumpkins. The clouds in the sky made it seem extra dark outside, and after the intense rain, the air was muggy and humid. As a result, the candles and the jack-o'-lanterns seemed to shimmer in the intense humidity, and the orange glow seemed incredibly pronounced. For just a moment, I was briefly transported to a crisp October night. But just as I was about to extinguish the candles, I noticed something. My porch light and the candles revealed what looked like footprints leading to and away from my front door. The heavy rain and the water it left standing everywhere meant that if you went walking tonight, you'd be leaving wet footprints everywhere, and thanks to the intense humidity, those footprints wouldn't immediately dry. So there I was, staring at a set of footprints that arrived at my door, then went away. I just shrugged it off and chuckled. No doubt someone wanted to come for a closer look at my jack-o'-lanterns. Probably take a picture or two. Well, they got a look just in time because I extinguished the candles, went back inside, and headed to bed without a moment's hesitation. I got up the next morning, had some breakfast, then went about my day. After spending time with my family, I came home, put away the leftovers from our meal together, and read a book on the couch. After a while, I had a snack, and since it was dark enough out, I went out on my front porch and lit the candles and the jack-o'-lanterns. Then I stood back to admire the sight for a moment until I went back inside and returned to my book. The intense humidity had lessened a bit, but was still high, so I stayed indoors to read instead of sitting on the porch like I often did. When it was time for me to head to bed, I went back out to extinguish the candles. The sight of candles inside the jack-o'-lanterns flickering away against the thick night sky was striking. I took it in for a moment before, one by one, the candles were out, and all that was left was a tiny wave of smoke billowing from each one. I was just about to turn around and go back inside when I looked down the street and saw someone. Despite all the bright street lamps positioned at every interval, I couldn't see quite as clearly as usual, as the person was standing far away, and the humidity still lingered in the air and gave everything a haze. But even from that distance, I could have sworn that whoever was there was watching me, and I couldn't be sure, but I thought the person was wearing some kind of costume. But then a car drove down the street, and when the car passed the spot where the person had been standing, there was no one there. So I went back in the house, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. The next day went by without incident, and I arrived home from work at my usual time. It was a bright sunny day, but not quite as humid as it was, so that was nice. After I lit all the candles in the jack-o'-lanterns, I ordered some pizza for dinner. Then I watched some TV until it arrived. Right on schedule, my doorbell rang. My pizza had been delivered by a guy in his mid-20s. When he told me the price, I handed him the money with a nice tip, told him to keep the change, and he gave me my pizza. Love the jack-o'-lanterns, by the way, he told me, just as I was about to close the door. Thanks. And I don't think I'm the only one who likes them. I saw a few people running by just as I was about to pull up. They were in costume too, so I think you started a trend. I laughed. Maybe. We'll see if it lasts. Thanks again for the pizza. Sure. You have a good night. Then I went inside, put on a movie, and had my pizza and some ice cream for dessert. I didn't feel tired, but at some point, I nodded off and woke up to the sound of knocking at my front door. I quickly checked my phone and saw it was 10:15. Then I headed to my front door. Whoever was at my door knocked again, just as I was about to answer it. But just before I did, I looked through the peephole and saw someone dressed as a vampire standing on the other side of the door. The sight made me chuckle. I was still chuckling when I unlocked the door and opened it. I have a screen door that also locks, so it provided another barrier between me and the guy in a vampire costume. Now I could see he was a guy in his early 20s, and his costume looked more elaborate than the typical one you get in a bag at the costume store, and his makeup looked carefully done, and he was holding a candy bag in front of him. Trick or treat. He called out enthusiastically a moment after I opened the door. I didn't answer at first, but I laughed. I love it, I said as I took in the sight of the costume. I had to laugh at the initiative. If I could carve pumpkins and put them outside this time of year, I couldn't help but admire someone doing this. The guy in the vampire costume hadn't said anything else, but he looked at me expectantly, the bag held out in front of him. Please give me 1 minute. I'll be right back. I promise. I said sincerely before I closed the main door and went to the kitchen. I always had plenty of candy, so it wasn't hard for me to get some miniature chocolate bars, some individually wrapped mints, and some peanut butter chocolates and get back to the door in a minute. When I opened the door again, the guy in the vampire costume hadn't moved an inch, but he held his bag up expectantly as he saw me with the candy in hand. He stood back as I opened the screen door and placed all the candy in his bag. I thought he deserved a lot of candy for effort. Here you are, I said as I placed the candy in the plastic bag. You look great. Thank you. He nodded respectfully as the last piece of candy fell into the bag. Happy Halloween. You too. Then he turned around, walked off my porch, and headed down the block and out of sight without saying a word. I took the opportunity to blow out the jack-o'-lantern candles before I went back inside. I was still laughing at the guy asking for candy. In all honesty, I was surprised more people hadn't done that. The rest of the week passed without anything noteworthy happening. In fact, I was so busy at work, I didn't have time to think about much of anything. I had been staying late, and I hadn't had time to light the jack-o'-lanterns by the time I got home. It was Friday afternoon by the time I could think about something other than work, and I immediately kicked myself mentally when I looked at my house and saw the pumpkins. Thanks to the summer heat, the pumpkins, which never lasted that long when carved to begin with, were not doing well at all, and this would probably be the last night before I had to throw them out. But it was fun while it lasted, so I went inside to get the lighter to light the candles, and just managed to get them all lit. Then I went back inside and made myself some dinner. Exhausted from my long week, I fell asleep on the couch and woke up later to knocking on my door. I briefly checked the time, saw it was past 9, and went to see who it was. A look out the peephole told me it was more people in Halloween costumes, but this time, the sight gave me a shiver. There were 5 of them, and when I opened the door, I immediately felt uneasy. They were dressed as a clown, a witch, a skeleton, a doctor, and a ghost. They looked to be about the same age as the guy in the vampire costume, but that was where the similarities stopped. The entire mood was different from last time.